You are mentally weak in every difficult situation, crumbling under pressure when you should stand firm, breaking under stress when you should strengthen, quitting when facing adversity when you should persist, letting emotions control you when you should control emotions, and avoiding challenges that could build strength because current weakness makes them feel impossible, making strength development impossible. This mental weakness is systematically destroying your potential by ensuring you never attempt anything truly difficult, destroying your resilience by keeping you in comfort zone where no strength develops, destroying your achievement capacity by making you quit before success arrives, destroying your reputation by making you unreliable under pressure, and destroying your life trajectory by guaranteeing you never become the strong person capable of extraordinary achievement. Mental strength is not genetic gift but developed capacity, not fixed trait but trainable skill, and not something requiring extreme circumstances but quality built through deliberate practice. This audiobook teaches mental strength development through the psychology of resilience that reveals how adversity builds strength, the neuroscience of mental toughness that shows how brain strengthens through challenge, the practices of fortitude development that forge unbreakable mind, and the systems of maintaining strength that make mental weakness disappear. Stop breaking under pressure and start building unbreakable resilience. Stop avoiding difficulty and start using challenge to strengthen. Build mental fortitude through systematic practice. Develop psychological resilience through adversity exposure. Forge unbreakable toughness through deliberate challenge, and become mentally strong through commitment. Starting now. Chapter 1. Accept that mental strength is built, not born through adversity. Accepting that mental strength is built, not born through adversity transforms helplessness into agency, because recognizing strength as developed enables building it. The development principle demonstrates that mental strength is not genetic gift you either have or lack. That toughness is built through challenge, not inherited at birth. That resilience develops through adversity, exposure, not predetermined by genetics. That viewing strength as fixed prevents building it, and that accepting that strength is built enables systematic development. Most people stay weak through believing strength is genetic trait they lack, thinking toughness is something you're born with, viewing resilience as fixed quality, not recognizing that adversity builds strength, and treating mental weakness as permanent, unchangeable condition. Strength is built, not born. Challenge creates toughness. Accept development or stay weak. Research demonstrates that mental strength is highly trainable capacity, that resilience develops through challenge exposure, that neuroplasticity shows brain strengthens through stress, that growth mindset about strength enables development, and that people who view strength as built become measurably stronger. The strength as skill mindset involves recognizing mental strength is developed capacity, not fixed trait, understanding that challenge builds resilience systematically, accepting that adversity is strength training, not punishment, viewing difficulty as growth, opportunity, not obstacle, treating mental strength as trainable skill like any other, and understanding that anyone can build toughness through practice. The fixed mindset destruction means rejecting belief that strength is genetic, refusing to accept weakness as permanent condition, understanding that anyone can build mental strength, recognizing that development requires practice, not genetics, treating strength as accessible to all through training, and knowing that believing strength is fixed guarantees staying weak. The adversity reframe involves seeing challenges as strength-building opportunities, understanding that difficulty creates toughness, recognizing that avoiding adversity maintains weakness, accepting that struggle develops resilience, treating hardship as mental training, not misfortune, and knowing that easy life creates weak mind. The neuroplasticity understanding shows that brain physically changes through challenge, that mental training strengthens neural pathways, that stress exposure builds physiological capacity, that brain adapts to adversity creating resilience, treating neuroplasticity as strength foundation, and understanding that your brain literally gets stronger through challenge. The challenge-strength connection demonstrates that adversity is required for strength development, that comfort maintains current weakness, that difficulty is necessary, not optional for toughness, that avoiding challenge prevents all growth, and that treating challenge as strength building changes relationship with difficulty. The growth mindset adoption means believing strength can be developed, understanding that effort creates capacity, recognizing that challenge builds ability, viewing setbacks as learning, treating development as possible for anyone, and knowing that growth mindset about strength enables actually building it. The genetics rejection involves understanding that while baseline may vary slightly, strength is built, that genetic differences are minor compared to training effects, that anyone can become significantly stronger, that genetics are excuse not limitation, and that treating strength as genetic prevents development. The adversity acceptance shows embracing challenges as necessary for growth, understanding that comfort maintains weakness, recognizing that difficulty is required for strength, accepting that adversity is inevitable and useful, treating challenges as training opportunities, and knowing that adversity avoidance guarantees permanent weakness. The practice requirement means understanding that strength requires systematic training, that occasional challenge builds nothing, that consistent adversity exposure is necessary, that viewing strength as skill means practicing it, and that treating development as requiring work enables commitment. The implementation requires accepting that mental strength is built through challenge, not inherited genetically, rejecting fixed mindset about toughness completely, embracing adversity as strength-building opportunity, understanding neuroplasticity enables development, viewing challenges as mental training, treating mental strength as skill, requiring systematic practice through adversity exposure, and recognizing that believing strength is built is first step to actually building it, where believing its genetic guarantees staying weak. Strength is built, not born. Challenge creates toughness. Accept development or stay weak. You understand now that mental strength is trainable, not genetic, that adversity builds resilience, that neuroplasticity enables strengthening, that growth mindset about strength enables development, and that Chapter 1 creates foundation by establishing that strength is built, making development possible where fixed mindset made weakness permanent. Chapter 2. Expose yourself to controlled adversity, building resilience. Progressively exposing yourself to controlled adversity builds resilience, progressively, because systematic challenge exposure strengthens mind without overwhelming it. The progressive exposure principle demonstrates that gradual adversity exposure builds strength safely, that controlled challenge develops resilience systematically, that starting small and increasing difficulty enables growth, that overwhelming challenge breaks rather than strengthens, and that progressive adversity creates sustainable development. Most people stay weak through avoiding all adversity completely, never exposing themselves to challenge, staying in comfort zone perpetually, not building strength progressively, and missing that controlled exposure is proven training method. Controlled adversity builds strength. Progressive challenge creates resilience. Expose systematically or stay weak. Research demonstrates that progressive challenge exposure builds resilience, that controlled adversity strengthens without trauma, that systematic difficulty increases mental capacity, that gradual exposure enables adaptation, and that people who practice controlled adversity become measurably stronger. The controlled adversity practice involves deliberately exposing yourself to manageable challenges, creating situations requiring mental strength, choosing difficulties within current capacity, practicing adversity in safe, controllable contexts, using controlled exposure as systematic training, and understanding that control enables learning while overwhelming causes trauma. The progressive difficulty principle means starting with small, manageable challenges, gradually increasing adversity levels systematically, building capacity through incremental exposure, expanding challenge tolerance progressively, treating progression as strength development method, and understanding that jumping to overwhelming difficulty breaks rather than builds. The adversity types include physical discomfort, like cold exposure, mental challenge, like difficult cognitive tasks, emotional stress, like uncomfortable conversations, social pressure, like public speaking or evaluation, physical exertion beyond comfortable, and treating variety as comprehensive strength development. The cold exposure protocol shows using cold showers as controlled adversity, building tolerance through consistent exposure, starting with manageable cold temperature and duration, then progressing, treating cold as accessible mental training, recognizing that physical challenge builds mental strength, and understanding that cold exposure is proven resilience training. The starting point selection means choosing challenges matching current capacity, avoiding overwhelming difficulty initially, selecting adversity slightly beyond comfort zone, ensuring challenge is controllable and safe, treating starting point as strategic foundation, and understanding that beginning appropriately enables progression. The progression method involves increasing challenge difficulty gradually, expanding adversity exposure systematically, building on previous capacity, avoiding plateaus at comfortable levels, treating progression as ongoing requirement, and understanding that continuous progression creates continuous strengthening. The discomfort practice shows deliberately choosing uncomfortable situations, exposing yourself to controllable stress, practicing staying in discomfort, building tolerance through repeated exposure, treating discomfort as adaptation stimulus, and understanding that comfort avoidance maintains weakness. The challenge variety requirement means using different adversity types, exposing yourself to varied challenges, preventing adaptation to single stimulus, developing comprehensive resilience, treating variety as complete training, and understanding that narrow exposure creates narrow strength. The safety maintenance shows ensuring challenges don't cause actual harm, maintaining control during adversity exposure, having ability to stop if truly needed, practicing adversity in safe contexts, treating safety as training prerequisite, and understanding that unsafe challenge creates trauma, not strength. The consistency requirement means exposing yourself to controlled adversity regularly, practicing challenge systematically, not sporadically, maintaining regular adversity exposure, treating consistency as development method, and understanding that occasional challenge builds nothing. The implementation requires identifying controlled adversity opportunities, starting with manageable challenges within capacity, exposing yourself to difficulty progressively, building tolerance through consistent practice, increasing adversity levels systematically over time, using variety of challenge types, maintaining safety while pushing boundaries, treating controlled adversity exposure as fundamental mental strength training, and understanding that progressive systematic challenge exposure builds resilience safely where avoidance maintains weakness. An overwhelming challenge causes harm, not growth. Controlled adversity builds strength. Progressive challenge creates resilience. Expose systematically or stay weak. You understand now that systematic adversity exposure builds resilience, that controlled challenge strengthens safely, that progressive difficulty enables growth, that variety creates comprehensive strength, and that Chapter 2 provides method making strength development possible where adversity avoidance made weakness permanent. Chapter 3 develops stress tolerance through consistent pressure exposure. Developing stress tolerance through consistent pressure exposure builds mental strength because repeated stress creates adaptation and increased capacity. The stress tolerance principle demonstrates that consistent pressure exposure builds capacity, that stress adaptation is trainable physiological response, that repeated stress makes you measurably stronger, that avoiding stress maintains current weakness, and that stress tolerance is fundamental component of mental strength. Most people stay weak through avoiding all stressed situations completely, never exposing themselves to pressure, seeking comfort and ease always, not building stress capacity systematically, and missing that stress exposure is proven strength training method. Stress exposure builds tolerance. Pressure practice creates strength. Practice stress or stay weak. Research demonstrates that stress inoculation builds resilience, that consistent pressure exposure increases physiological tolerance, that repeated manageable stress creates positive adaptation, that stress avoidance maintains weakness, and that people who practice stress exposure become measurably stronger. The stress inoculation practice involves deliberately exposing yourself to pressure situations, practicing performance under stress conditions, creating high-stakes situations for training, building comfort with pressure through exposure, treating stress as training opportunity, not threat, and understanding that inoculation works through repeated controlled exposure. The pressure exposure types show time pressure through aggressive deadlines, performance pressure through meaningful stakes, social pressure through evaluation and judgment, cognitive pressure through difficult mental demands, physical pressure through demanding exertion, and treating variety as comprehensive stress training. The deadline practice means setting aggressive time constraints deliberately, working under time pressure regularly, practicing rapid performance under deadlines, building deadline tolerance through exposure, treating time pressure as accessible training tool, and understanding that artificial deadlines create real stress training. The high-stakes simulation involves creating situations with real consequences, practicing when outcomes actually matter, exposing yourself to performance pressure, building capacity under meaningful stakes, treating high-stakes practice as essential training, and understanding that low-stakes practice transfers poorly to high-stakes performance. The evaluation exposure shows deliberately putting yourself in judged situations, practicing performance under observation, building comfort with scrutiny and criticism, developing pressure, performance capacity, treating evaluation as strength-building context, and understanding that avoiding judgment maintains evaluation anxiety. The performance pressure practice means functioning when outcomes matter, maintaining capacity under stress, performing despite pressure, building stress performance ability, treating pressure situations as training, and understanding that pressure avoidance prevents pressure capacity development. The stress response training involves practicing calm under pressure, controlling physiological reactions during stress, maintaining performance despite stress response, building stress management capacity, treating response as trainable skill, and understanding that unmanaged stress response prevents performance. The pressure consistency requirement shows exposing yourself to stress regularly, practicing pressure situations systematically, maintaining regular stress exposure, treating consistency as capacity builder, understanding that occasional pressure builds minimal tolerance, and recognizing that regular exposure creates adaptation. The recovery practice involves allowing stress recovery between exposures, using rest periods for physiological adaptation, avoiding chronic overwhelming stress, balancing stress exposure and recovery, treating recovery as essential training component, and understanding that recovery enables adaptation while chronic stress causes breakdown. The stress progression means increasing pressure level gradually, building tolerance systematically, expanding stress capacity progressively, avoiding stagnation at comfortable pressure, and treating progression as ongoing strengthening method. The implementation requires exposing yourself to stress consistently and systematically, practicing pressure situations regularly, building stress tolerance progressively, using variety of pressure types, maintaining performance under stress, allowing adequate recovery between exposures, avoiding complete stress avoidance, treating consistent stress exposure as mental strength training, and understanding that stress tolerance builds through regular controlled pressure exposure, creating physiological adaptation where stress avoidance maintains weakness, making pressure performance impossible. Stress exposure builds tolerance. Pressure practice creates strength. Practice stress or stay weak. You understand now that stress tolerance is trainable, that consistent pressure builds capacity, that variety creates comprehensive strength, that recovery enables adaptation, and that Chapter 3 builds stress capacity, making pressure performance possible where stress avoidance made. Breakdown under pressure inevitable. Chapter 4. Master emotional regulation, controlling responses. Under pressure, mastering emotional regulation by controlling responses under pressure builds mental strength, because emotional control enables performance when feelings would sabotage success. The emotional regulation principle demonstrates that mental strength requires controlling emotions, that unregulated emotions prevent strength expression, that emotional mastery enables pressure performance, that reactive responses create weakness under stress, and that emotional control is highly trainable skill. Most people stay weak through being controlled by emotions, reacting impulsively under pressure, letting feelings determine actions, being unable to perform when emotional, and lacking emotional regulation capacity. Emotions controlled enable performance. Regulation creates strength. Master feelings or break under pressure. Research demonstrates that emotional regulation predicts resilience, that controlling emotions improves pressure performance dramatically, that emotional mastery enables mental strength expression, that reactive people break under stress, and that emotional regulation is highly trainable capacity. The emotional awareness practice involves recognizing emotions before they control behavior, identifying feelings in real time as they arise, observing emotional states without being controlled, catching emotions early before escalation, treating awareness as first regulation step, and understanding that unrecognized emotions control you while recognized emotions can be managed. The emotion-action separation means understanding that feeling emotion doesn't require acting on it, recognizing emotions as information, not commands, requiring obedience, creating gap between emotional experience and behavioral response, choosing actions despite strong feelings, treating separation as fundamental regulation skill, and understanding that emotions and actions are separate processes. The cognitive reappraisal technique shows changing how you interpret situations, reframing events to alter emotional response, viewing challenges differently to reduce negative emotion, using interpretation to manage feelings, treating reappraisal as powerful regulation tool, and understanding that situations don't create emotions but interpretations do. The emotional suppression involves temporarily inhibiting emotional expression when appropriate, suppressing feelings during performance when needed, controlling emotional display under pressure, using suppression strategically, not chronically, treating suppression as situation-specific tool, and understanding that appropriate suppression enables functioning while chronic suppression causes problems. The distress tolerance building means staying functional during emotional pain, performing despite negative feelings, building capacity for emotional discomfort, maintaining action during psychological distress, treating tolerance as fundamental strength component, and understanding that distress intolerance prevents functioning under pressure. The pressure performance practice shows maintaining emotional control under stress, performing rationally when feelings are strong, acting deliberately despite emotions, staying focused during emotional activation, treating pressure performance as regulation training, and understanding that pressure reveals regulation capacity. The breathing regulation technique involves using controlled breathing to manage emotions, employing specific breathing patterns to reduce arousal, practicing breath control during stress, using breath as emotion regulation tool, treating breathing as accessible technique, and understanding that breathing affects emotional state physiologically. The emotional recovery practice means processing emotions appropriately after events, allowing emotional experience when safe, not suppressing chronically, which causes problems, using recovery periods for emotional processing, treating recovery as regulation component, and understanding that regulation includes appropriate expression, not just suppression. The regulation consistency requirement shows practicing emotional control daily, training regulation in low-stakes situations, building capacity through consistent practice, maintaining regulation training regularly, treating consistency as skill development method, and understanding that occasional practice builds minimal capacity. The high emotion performance means functioning when feelings are intense, maintaining capacity during strong emotions, performing despite emotional activation, building ability to act rationally when emotionally, and treating high emotion performance as ultimate regulation test. The implementation requires recognizing emotions before they control behavior, separating emotional experience from actions taken, using cognitive reappraisal to manage feelings, employing strategic suppression when appropriate, building distress tolerance progressively, maintaining performance despite strong emotions, using breathing for regulation, allowing appropriate emotional recovery, practicing regulation consistently, and understanding that emotional regulation mastery enables pressure performance where emotional reactivity prevents functioning, making control essential mental strength component. Emotions controlled enable performance. Regulation creates strength. Master feelings or break under pressure. You understand now that emotional regulation is trainable, that controlling feelings enables performance, that techniques exist for managing emotions, that distress tolerance is fundamental, and that Chapter 4 builds emotional control, making pressure performance possible, where reactivity made breakdown under stress inevitable. Chapter 5, build physical toughness, creating foundation for mental strength. Building physical toughness creates foundation for mental strength because body and mind strengthen together through challenge in interconnected way. The mind-body connection demonstrates that physical toughness builds mental toughness, that body training strengthens mind simultaneously, that physical challenge creates mental capacity, that ignoring body limits mental strength development, and that physical toughness is essential mental strength foundation. Most people stay weak through neglecting physical training completely, avoiding physical challenge, not recognizing mind-body connection, focusing only on mental while ignoring physical, and missing that physical toughness enables mental strength expression. Physical toughness builds mental strength. Body training strengthens mind. Train physically or limit mental capacity. Research demonstrates that physical training improves mental resilience dramatically, that exercise builds stress tolerance and emotional regulation, that physical challenge strengthens mind measurably, that body toughness transfers directly to mental toughness, and that people who train physically become mentally stronger. The physical training requirement involves implementing consistent, rigorous physical challenge, training body without exception, pushing physical limits regularly, building physical capacity systematically, treating physical training as mental training, and understanding that physical neglect limits mental development. The physical adversity practice shows exposing body to controlled hardship, training through physical discomfort deliberately, pushing beyond physical comfort zones, building physical resilience through challenge, treating physical adversity as strength training, and understanding that physical comfort maintains weakness. The endurance development means building cardiovascular capacity through sustained effort, training physical stamina systematically, developing ability to sustain physical effort, pushing through physical fatigue regularly, treating endurance as fundamental capacity, and understanding that endurance training builds mental perseverance. The strength training shows building physical power through resistance, developing muscular strength systematically, pushing heavy loads regularly, creating physical capacity through progressive overload, treating strength training as toughness building, and understanding that physical strength creates mental confidence. The cold exposure practice involves using cold showers daily without exception, exposing body to cold water regularly, building cold tolerance progressively, training through temperature discomfort, treating cold as accessible mental physical training, and understanding that cold exposure builds both physical and mental resilience. The physical discomfort tolerance means training through physical pain appropriately, building capacity for bodily discomfort, pushing through physical challenge, developing physical resilience systematically, treating discomfort as adaptation stimulus, and understanding that physical comfort avoidance maintains weakness. The high-intensity training shows pushing body to maximum capacity, training at very high-intensity levels, building capacity through extreme effort, developing ability to sustain intensity, treating high intensity as toughness training, and understanding that moderate training builds moderate capacity. The physical discipline requirement means training physically regardless of feelings, maintaining consistency without exception, following through despite not wanting to, building physical discipline as mental discipline, treating physical consistency as non-negotiable, and understanding that physical discipline creates overall discipline. The recovery balance involves allowing physical recovery appropriately, avoiding chronic breakdown from overtraining, balancing intense training with adequate rest, using recovery for adaptation, treating recovery as training component, and understanding that recovery enables strengthening while chronic exhaustion causes breakdown. The variety training means using different physical challenges, training multiple physical capacities, avoiding single modality training, developing comprehensive physical toughness, treating variety as complete development, and understanding that narrow training creates narrow capacity. The implementation requires establishing rigorous physical training practice immediately, exposing body to controlled adversity regularly, building physical capacity systematically through progressive challenge, training through physical discomfort consistently, developing both endurance and strength, using cold exposure daily, maintaining training consistency absolutely, balancing training with recovery appropriately, using training variety, and understanding that physical toughness creates essential mental strength foundation where physical neglect limits mental capacity, making physical training non-negotiable for complete mental strength development. Physical toughness builds mental strength. Body training strengthens mind. Train physically or limit mental capacity. You understand now that mind and body strengthen together, that physical training builds mental resilience, that physical toughness transfers to mental toughness, that physical discipline creates mental discipline, and that Chapter 5 establishes physical foundation making complete mental strength possible where physical neglect made limited mental capacity inevitable. Chapter 6. Practice persistence through failure building. Quit resistance. Practicing persistence through failure builds quit resistance because continuing despite setbacks creates unbreakable mental strength. The persistence principle demonstrates that mental strength requires not quitting ever, that persistence through failure builds resilience, that quit resistance is trainable capacity, that continuing despite repeated setbacks creates toughness, and that giving up prevents all strength development. Most people stay weak through quitting when facing failure, giving up immediately after setbacks, not persisting through difficulty, lacking quit resistance capacity, and treating failure as valid reason to stop effort. Quitting prevents strength. Persistence builds toughness. Continue despite failure or stay weak. Research demonstrates that persistence predicts mental strength better than talent, that continuing through failure builds resilience dramatically, that quit resistance is fundamental toughness component, that people who persist become measurably stronger, and that giving up maintains permanent weakness. The failure reframe involves viewing failure as essential training opportunity, understanding that setbacks build strength, not indicate weakness, recognizing that failure is learning process, accepting that losing teaches persistence, treating failure as necessary for development, and understanding that success without failure builds no mental strength. The continued practice means pushing forward immediately after every failure, maintaining effort despite repeated setbacks, refusing to quit regardless of difficulty, persisting through multiple consecutive failures, treating continuation as fundamental practice, and understanding that continuing when wanting to quit builds quit resistance. The quit impulse recognition shows identifying the exact moment you want to quit, recognizing giving up urges as they arise, catching quitting thoughts immediately, observing surrender impulses without following them, treating quit recognition as override opportunity, and understanding that unrecognized quit impulses control behavior. The one more principle involves always doing one more attempt after wanting to stop, continuing beyond normal quitting point, pushing past the moment of wanting to quit, refusing to quit when urged by feelings, treating one more as non-negotiable practice, and understanding that one more builds quit resistance directly. The failure exposure means deliberately attempting very difficult things, practicing activities where failure is highly likely, exposing yourself to setbacks intentionally, building failure tolerance through experience, treating failure as training context, not outcome to avoid, and understanding that failure avoidance prevents persistence development. The setback recovery shows bouncing back quickly after every failure, returning immediately to effort after setback, maintaining persistence despite losing, recovering rapidly from defeats, treating recovery speed as trainable, and understanding that slow recovery enables quitting, while fast recovery maintains momentum. The multiple failure persistence means continuing through not just one, but many failures, persisting despite repeated consecutive setbacks, maintaining effort through extended failure periods, building capacity for sustained failure tolerance, treating multiple failures as ultimate persistence test, and understanding that quitting after one failure prevents real strength development. The long-term persistence shows maintaining effort over extended time periods, persisting through months or years of difficulty, staying committed despite prolonged lack of success, building marathon persistence, not sprint, treating long-term as ultimate mental strength test, and understanding that short-term persistence builds minimal capacity. The failure-success separation means understanding that persistence matters more than outcomes, recognizing that continuing despite failure is success, treating persistence itself as victory, regardless of results, separating process from outcomes, and understanding that persistence creates eventual success while quitting guarantees permanent failure. The implementation requires continuing immediately after every single failure, refusing to quit despite any setbacks, pushing through repeatedly when wanting to stop, building quit resistance systematically through practice, exposing yourself to failure deliberately and regularly, recovering quickly from every setback, maintaining persistence through multiple consecutive failures, sustaining effort over long time periods, treating continuation as non-negotiable regardless of outcomes, and understanding that persistence through failure builds unbreakable quit resistance, making mental strength permanent, where quitting after setbacks maintained permanent weakness. Quitting prevents strength, persistence builds toughness. Continue despite failure or stay weak. You understand now that persistence is fundamental mental strength, that continuing despite failure builds quit resistance, that one more principle creates toughness, that failure exposure is training method, and that Chapter 6 builds persistence, making unbreakable strength possible, where quitting made weakness permanent. Chapter 7. Develop self-reliance, trusting your capacity under pressure. Developing self-reliance by trusting your capacity under pressure builds mental strength, because confidence in yourself enables performance when external support is absent. The self-reliance principle demonstrates that mental strength requires trusting yourself completely. That self-reliance builds unshakable confidence, that depending on others excessively maintains weakness, that trusting your own capacity enables pressure performance, and that self-reliance is fundamental toughness component. Most people stay weak through depending on others excessively, not trusting their own capacity, seeking external validation constantly, lacking confidence in themselves, and requiring support to function, making independence impossible. Self-reliance builds strength. Trusting yourself enables performance. Develop independence or stay dependent. Research demonstrates that self-reliance predicts mental strength, that self-trust enables pressure performance, that depending on others limits resilience capacity, that confidence in own capacity builds toughness, and that people who develop self-reliance become measurably stronger. The self-trust building involves believing in your own capacity genuinely, trusting yourself under pressure situations, having confidence in your abilities, relying on yourself primarily, not others, treating self-trust as trainable through proving capacity, and understanding that self-trust comes from demonstrated competence, not positive thinking. The independence practice means handling challenges completely alone, solving problems without any help, functioning effectively without support, building capacity for solitary effort, treating independence as systematic training, and understanding that constant support seeking prevents independence development. The self-validation development shows validating yourself internally, not externally, not requiring approval from others, trusting your own judgment, believing in your decisions, treating self-validation as fundamental strength, and understanding that external validation dependence maintains weakness. The confidence building involves proving capacity through actual achievement, demonstrating ability repeatedly through performance, building objective evidence of competence, creating self-trust through results, not affirmations, treating confidence as earned, not assumed, and understanding that confidence without competence is delusion. The support dependence reduction means systematically decreasing reliance on others, building capacity for independent function, handling pressure without help, developing self-sufficiency progressively, treating independence as explicit goal, and understanding that dependence maintains weakness regardless of support availability. The pressure self-trust shows trusting yourself, especially under stress, believing in capacity during difficulty, maintaining confidence under pressure, relying on yourself when challenged, treating pressure trust as ultimate self-reliance test, and understanding that fair weather confidence proves nothing. The solitary challenge practice involves deliberately facing difficulty alone, handling problems without any support, functioning independently during challenges, building capacity for solitude, treating alone challenges as training, and understanding that constant companionship prevents self-reliance development. The decision-making trust means trusting your own decisions, making choices without seeking approval, believing in your judgment, acting on decisions confidently, treating decision trust as fundamental, and understanding that decision dependence on others prevents self-trust development. The capability proving involves demonstrating to yourself that you can handle challenges, proving through action that you're capable, building evidence of competence systematically, creating track record of independent success, and treating proving as self-trust foundation. The validation-seeking elimination shows stopping constant approval-seeking, ending external validation dependence, not requiring others to confirm decisions, building internal validation capacity, treating validation independence as strength, and understanding that validation-seeking maintains weakness. The implementation requires trusting your own capacity genuinely, building self-reliance systematically through independent challenges, reducing dependence on others progressively, developing internal self-validation, creating confidence through demonstrated achievement, facing challenges independently regularly, maintaining self-trust, especially under pressure, handling solitary challenges, making decisions without seeking approval, proving capability to yourself repeatedly, and understanding that self-reliance development enables pressure performance through confidence in own capacity, where dependence on others made functioning without support impossible, creating fundamental mental strength component. Self-reliance builds strength. Trusting yourself enables performance. Develop independence or stay dependent. You understand now that self-reliance is fundamental mental strength, that trusting yourself enables pressure performance, that independence is trainable, that confidence comes from demonstrated capacity, and that Chapter 7 builds self-reliance, making independent strength possible where dependence made functioning without support impossible. Chapter 8, maintain mental strength through consistent practice and challenge. Maintaining mental strength through consistent practice and challenge sustains resilience because strength atrophies without continuous use, requiring ongoing lifelong training. The maintenance principle demonstrates that mental strength requires consistent practice indefinitely, that unused strength atrophies rapidly, that ongoing challenge maintains resilience, that stopping practice creates weakness return, and that maintenance is permanent lifelong requirement, not temporary effort. Most people lose strength through stopping practice after initial building, not maintaining through ongoing challenge, letting strength atrophy from disuse, treating development as one-time achievement, and missing that maintenance requires continuous permanent work. Unused strength atrophies, consistent practice maintains toughness. Practice forever or lose strength. Research demonstrates that mental strength requires continuous maintenance, that unused capacity decreases rapidly, that consistent challenge sustains resilience, that stopping practice causes predictable regression, and that people who maintain practice indefinitely stay strong, while those who stop lose strength. The consistent challenge requirement involves continuing adversity, exposure indefinitely, forever, never stopping mental strength training, maintaining regular challenge exposure, treating practice as permanent lifestyle, not temporary program, understanding that maintenance truly never ends, and recognizing that lifelong practice is non-negotiable for sustained strength. The strength atrophy prevention means using mental strength regularly through ongoing challenge, exposing yourself to continued adversity, maintaining pressure practice consistently, preventing capacity decrease through use, treating regular use as atrophy prevention method, and understanding that even brief practice cessation causes measurable strength loss. The progressive challenge continuation shows continuing to increase difficulty indefinitely, never plateauing at comfortable level permanently, maintaining growth trajectory throughout life, pushing boundaries continuously, not stopping, treating progression as ongoing lifelong practice, and understanding that stagnation at any level eventually causes regression. The variety maintenance involves consistently using different challenge types, exposing yourself to varied adversity regularly, maintaining comprehensive practice across domains, preventing adaptation to single repeated challenge, treating variety as essential maintenance component, and understanding that narrow repetitive practice creates narrow limited strength. The consistency, absolute priority, means practicing mental strength daily, without exception ever, never taking extended breaks from training, maintaining regular systematic training, treating consistency as supreme above all else, understanding that sporadic practice maintains absolutely nothing, and recognizing that daily practice is non-negotiable requirement. The regression recognition shows quickly identifying when strength is decreasing, noticing capacity loss immediately, catching atrophy early before significant loss, recognizing weakness, return signs, treating regression as urgent signal to increase practice, and understanding that unrecognized regression continues until strength disappears. The lifestyle integration means making mental strength practice permanent life component, integrating challenge into daily life permanently, treating strength training as normal, not special, maintaining practice indefinitely as lifestyle, understanding that strong is way of living, not achievement to reach, and recognizing that temporary practice produces temporary strength. The practice non-negotiability shows treating mental strength training as absolutely mandatory, never making excuses to skip practice, maintaining training regardless of circumstances, understanding that no valid reason exists to stop, treating practice as non-optional as breathing, and recognizing that negotiable practice is not practice. The permanent commitment requirement means committing to lifelong practice, understanding maintenance never ends, accepting that strength requires continuous work forever, treating commitment as permanent, not temporary, and recognizing that mental strength is sustained through permanent dedication. The strength-as lifestyle means living in a way that maintains strength, making daily choices, supporting resilience, integrating challenge naturally into life, treating strong as identity, not goal, and understanding that lifestyle integration enables permanent maintenance. The implementation requires maintaining mental strength practice consistently, forever, without stopping, exposing yourself to ongoing challenge indefinitely, preventing strength atrophy through continuous use, continuing progression throughout entire life, using variety of challenges regularly, prioritizing consistency absolutely above all, catching regression immediately, and increasing practice. Integrating practice into permanent lifestyle, treating training as non-negotiable, mandatory, committing permanently to lifelong maintenance, and understanding that mental strength requires ongoing consistent practice through continuous challenge or atrophies. Back to weakness requiring permanent dedication to maintaining resilience, making strength sustained or lost based solely on continued practice. You have learned how to become mentally strong. Accept that strength is built, not born through adversity. Expose yourself to controlled adversity progressively. Develop stress tolerance through consistent pressure. Master emotional regulation under pressure. Build physical toughness as foundation. Practice persistence through failure. Develop self-reliance, trusting yourself. Maintain strength through consistent practice. What matters now is implementing systematic strength training, starting immediately. 5. Implementation priorities. Expose yourself to controlled adversity daily. Practice stress situations regularly. Train physically without exception. Continue, despite every failure. Maintain practice permanently. Execute these consistently. Build mental strength, systematically, and become mentally strong. Stop breaking under pressure and start building unbreakable resilience. Stop avoiding difficulty and start using challenge to strengthen. Build mental fortitude through systematic practice. Develop psychological resilience through adversity exposure. Forge unbreakable toughness through deliberate challenge, and become mentally strong through commitment, starting now.